Hi, good morning, everybody. The point of our little session today is to kind of give you a quick overview of the Spectrum Eyeset, some of the basics that can really help you get started so that you feel comfortable plugging it in, using it, and starting to explore some things. And so what I wanted to do before we jump straight into playing with the glasses was I've got just a few PowerPoint slides that I want to bring up just to talk about some basic concepts that may be helpful as a background. And some of it you might be familiar with, but some of it you might not, or, an overview doesn't hurt. So I'm going to pull up my slide deck real quick. So here we go. So first things first, I wanted to talk basically about brainwaves as a starting place, because obviously everything that we're doing with the audiovisual entrainment revolves around the idea of manipulating in one way or another our brainwaves. So it's helpful to understand what the heck we're talking about in a basic sense. And so when we're talking about brainwaves, basically we're talking about the electricity that the brain generates. And so when we record the brainwave activity with an EEG, this is kind of what it looks like, right, on the screen. This is a 19-channel EEG. These are my brain waves, actually, from who knows when, a long time ago. And so it's just a bunch of squiggle lines. And so this by itself makes it difficult to understand what the heck's going on. So what we do is we take that data and those raw squiggle lines, and we run it through a filter. And what that filter allows us to do is to see specific frequencies that live within that raw EEG. So the best analogy is kind of the way that light works. So if you look at a white beam of light and you take that white beam of light and you run it through a prism, you get a rainbow on the other side. Mm-hmm. And so what that tells us, right, is that white light contains all of the colors. White light contains all of the color spectrum, visible light. But we don't see it unless we filter it, unless you run it through a raindrop or you run it through a prism or something. Now, what's interesting about that is that each of the colors is a different frequency. Red is a different frequency than green, and green is a different frequency than yellow. So white light contains a bunch of frequencies. And so the brain is kind of the same way. The EEG pattern that we see back over here, each one of those little lines is kind of like white light. So there's a whole bunch of frequencies inside each one of those lines. We just don't see it until we filter it. So just like white light, we have to take it and we run it through a filter. Of course, we do this digitally, right? And then what we get out on the other side are the brain waves that we're all sort of familiar with. Delta, theta, alpha, beta, gamma. Those are the simple way to break it down. And one way to think about this is that each of these brainwave patterns is kind of like a color of the rainbow, right? So just like you can take white light and you get all the colors, you take an EEG pattern and you get these brainwave colors, delta, theta, alpha, beta, gamma. So going from slow to fast, delta is the slowest brainwave. And then, moving up, theta is a little bit faster, alpha is a little bit faster. And by faster, what we mean is there's more repetitions in a second of time. So even though this is really just sort of a demonstration, these little moving waves on the screen, you can see that the delta, there's only one or two cycles within the window at any point. But then if you look up at gamma, there's maybe, 5 or 6 cycles in the window at any point. So it's faster. There's more repetitions. So to get more specific and more realistic in terms of what brainwaves look like, this is kind of how we break it apart. We break it down by how many repetitions there are in a second of time. And that tells us which brainwave it is. And so you can see the delta on this screen. here's 1 second of time. There's delta, there's only a few cycles within that second. It's very slow. Now you look at theta, and there's more like, 5 or 6. So this is how we distinguish brainwave differences. So delta is defined by 1 to 3 or sometimes 1 to 4 hertz, 1 to 4 cycles per second. So again, if you kind of look at this, there's only 3 or 4 cycles within that period of time. Theta is defined as 4 to 7 or 4 to 8 hertz or cycles per second. Alpha is 8 to 12, right? So you can see there's more repetitions. And then beta is even faster, right? So depending on how you want to define it, anywhere from 12 on up could be beta. And then we have gamma, which isn't even on this little, chart showing the little brain waves, but it's listed on the side there. So gamma is the fastest brainwave that we deal with, and it's typically defined as activity that's between 35 and 45 hertz or cycles per second. So the brain is making all of these different frequencies all the time, everywhere, right? Just like the white light, it's all contained within the EEG signal. So it's a little bit of a mistake to think that the brain is only making one brainwave at a time. So some people kind of talk about it that way, that, oh, I'm in an alpha state. And it kind of suggests that you're only making alpha in that moment. And that's actually not what's happening. You're still making all of the other brainwaves, but maybe you're making more alpha in that moment. So it has to do with the relative distribution. How much of each of the brainwaves are you making at any given moment? Sorry, I'm turning off my phone. There was my mindfulness bell just went off. So need to get in here and silence it. Should have done that beforehand. Okay. So we're talking about a relative balance of power with the brainwaves. And so a simple way to think about what that means is that when the balance of power shifts toward certain brainwaves, then it changes our state of consciousness. So if there happens to be a lot of delta, we're usually asleep or unconscious, right? Because it's a very slow brainwave. So if we have a whole bunch of delta, really slow brainwave, we're probably not able to be aware, right, of our environment. Theta is a little bit faster. And sometimes with theta, it can be like when we're drifting off to sleep, right? When you have those weird little half dreams, when you're starting to kind of fall asleep and you're in that weird twilight state. That can be theta. But we can also have theta when we're awake and alert, and it's often associated with intuition and creativity and memory. It's also associated with the subconscious mind. Alpha's kind of in the middle. Alpha's more like a relaxed internal awareness. We're paying attention to what's happening inside, but in a kind of a relaxed, quiet way. Beta is where we start getting into fast brain waves. So we can almost think of delta, theta, and alpha as being slow brain waves, and then everything above that as being fast brain waves. So beta is kind of like thinking, processing, analyzing, being alert, paying attention, problem solving, making decisions, all that kind of stuff. And then gamma, the one that's the highest, it is involved with kind of just activity in the brain, but it's also associated with things like being in the zone or being in a flow state. So having access to information without putting in a lot of effort. So just having, it's like you just tap in, right? You know something. And so again, everybody on this call will remember, hopefully, that from the workshop, right, that we talked about that for psychic states, very often gamma and theta seem to be the ones that show up the most often. And it kind of makes sense. when you think about what those two are involved in, that they may be the ones that we see most often. So let's transition this over to audiovisual entrainment. So everybody kind of knows what this is at this point, right? You're using glasses and headphones, so light and sound stimulation. And when you turn them on, the glasses flash on and off, the lights flicker on and off at a specific rate, depending on what program you chose to use. And so what happens, and of course the tones in the headphones are matching that. They're happening at the same frequency. So if the lights are flashing on and off 9 times a second, the headphones have little tones in them also happening 9 times a second. So, it might be like do, 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 something like that. So the idea is that, well, it's more than an idea. The science is that the brain will follow those frequencies. So whatever frequencies you give to the brain, in this example, 9 hertz, 9 cycles per second, the brain will start producing more 9 hertz activity. So that's the entrainment component. So we can use audio and visual stimulation to essentially pull the brain toward the desired frequency. So if you think about what we just talked about with brain waves, this is pretty useful, because what that means is that we can use it to increase or decrease the activity in the brain. We can turn the fast brain waves up. We can turn the slow brain waves up. We can have some sort of balance between them, and that can affect our state of consciousness, which is why this is such a useful and powerful tool. So this is, you guys know what it looks like, but that's kind of the basic setup. Just these sort of 1980s science fiction looking glasses and some headphones. So choosing a frequency, why would you choose? So with the AVE system, you can decide which frequencies you're interested in, right? Where do you want to pull your brain toward? And so this is probably the most important slide, because it's giving you an idea of why you might want to use certain programs, certain frequencies, as opposed to others. So we'll start with the fastest and kind of work our way down. So gamma programs, gamma protocols, they can be used for things like brain brightening. Now, what does that mean? Well, so sometimes, whether it's like age-related cognitive decline, or somebody's had a head injury, or there's some other kind of cognitive concerns, it can kind of sharpen the brain, right? It kind of like ramps it up, gets it functioning at a higher level. Some of the beta programs can do that too. You're basically waking the brain up and getting it more engaged and more active. So it can be really good for that. But because of the other special qualities of gamma, right, where it can be involved in being in the flow state, as well as some of these psychic activities, right? Because we see gamma a lot, especially with things like psychic readings. So we may also be able to use gamma for sort of engaging these higher vibrations. This is the fastest brainwave that we can really work with in the brain. So it kind of makes sense that maybe it's connected to this idea of a higher vibration. Also seems to be useful for practices like clairvoyance or ESP type activities, where you're activating the occipital lobe, the back part of the brain that is involved in visual processing. And so kind of cranking up the gamma there can be very useful. Now, going down a level. So beta, this is the stimulating stuff, right? The active part. So this is really good as a counterbalance for people that have slower brain issues. So you can kind of think of AVE, audiovisual entrainment, as being a counterbalance. So what's the brain doing that might be causing us problems? And then how do we use the AVE to shift it in the other direction? So the stereotypical brainwave pattern for ADHD and depression is actually too much slow brainwave activity, too much theta or too much alpha. So to counterbalance that, we give it more fast activity. So in particular, with these programs, we tend to use frequencies between 14 and 20 hertz. Now it says 14 to 30 on here, and you could do that, but usually we're just going 14 to 20 for this approach. If we go too much faster than that, sometimes it makes people feel a little anxious, and we certainly don't want that. So anyway, and like I mentioned, that frequency can also be good for kind of that brain brightening kind of idea as well. Now, alpha, this is in the middle. And you remember that we said alpha was good for kind of relaxation. It's good for internal awareness. So it's a nice meditation type protocol. This is often the best one to start with. So if you've not used your device, this is a good place to start, is picking one of the alpha programs. And I say that because alpha is kind of our natural brain rhythm when our eyes are closed. And so it's easy to get the brain to go there because it knows what alpha is. And it's an easier way to kind of get an introduction into using the equipment. And just about everybody likes alpha. So it's kind of a low-hanging fruit way to get started. Good for relaxation, good for anxiety, right? So again, think about it. It's a counterbalance. With anxiety, we often see too much fast brainwave activity, too much beta. So we need to come down a little bit, like relax the brain. So alpha is a good way to do that. Sometimes theta can do that for people too. Speaking of theta, so going down another level. So now we're getting into some pretty slow brainwave patterns here. And theta can be really good for things like self-hypnosis. So a hypnotic state is in the theta range. So if you're doing any sort of self-hypnosis, this is a good one. If you want to get into memory access, remember theta is involved with memories. So, or in the subconscious mind. So if you're wanting to tap into that kind of stuff, theta is good. You might remember from our workshops that theta is also an important frequency that exists between the Earth and the ionosphere, the Schumann resonance. So that 7.83 hertz, that's in the theta range. So if you're wanting more of that natural frequency that we connect with. And as we mentioned, this is also a good frequency for connecting in with some psi abilities. I just had somebody recently where they were using a theta program and felt like there was somebody was touching their shoulder during the session. And, you know, I've had things like that happen to me using theta programs. So it gets you into a little bit of an altered state and gives you a little more access to sometimes to the other side. And then delta, slowest brainwave and associated with sleep. So this is a nice one to use before going to bed. If you have trouble with sleep or you don't get enough deep sleep, delta can be really good for that. Otherwise, we pretty much don't use delta. It's pretty much just for sleep. Then you can do some other fancy stuff. So dual stimulation. So you can actually send one frequency to the left hemisphere and a different frequency to the right hemisphere. And most of the protocols that are already designed to do this, they're sending a little bit of a faster rhythm to the left hemisphere and a little bit of a quieter, calming frequency to the right hemisphere. So that approach is also really good for ADHD, really good for depression. It's good for PTSD. It's good for traumatic brain injuries. So doing this dual stimulation is good for a lot of different kinds of mental health concerns. I probably wouldn't use it just for straight up anxiety, but I would use it for just about anything else. Now, as far as using it for psychic development, these programs are actually oriented in the opposite direction of what we would do for psychic development, because these programs are activating the left hemisphere and relaxing the right. We would want to do the opposite for psychic development. And they don't have any programs built in that automatically do that. There is a way to upload or design protocols that can do that, but none of the ones that already exist on your program are going to let you access that type of program. And then there's Ganzfeld. Ganzfeld is actually not even in training. It's just holding the light constant. So usually we use it with red light, just holding the light. And we'll often use this with white noise. So instead of whatever sounds are coming from the system, putting on a white noise player, whether it's on YouTube or through an app or whatever. And so this, for whatever reason, I think what it's doing is it's flooding the visual cortex with information, visual information, but there's nothing there to make any sense out of. So the brain just kind of like gives up and stops trying to make sense out of what it's seeing and just opens up a little bit more. That's my theory. But Ganzfeld has been used in a lot of different psychic research over the years, particularly with like telepathy and things like that, and shown that it is effective. I've also seen it used with ghost hunting, so with spirit communication, as a way to kind of shut down the normal functionings of the brain and open up to be able to, excuse me, connect with the other side more easily. So this is a program that you can also access on your glasses. All right, one more slide, then we're going to get to the glasses themselves. So this is just a demonstration of some data that I collected years ago with somebody who was using these glasses to try to boost their alpha activity. So this was somebody that had anxiety and we wanted to increase alpha. Okay. Now, the reason I like showing this slide is you can see that there was 13 sessions that we did. This is the amount of alpha activity on this blue chart, the blue bar graphs. And what you can see is that the first 4 sessions, the alpha didn't really do much. It really didn't do much until about the 5th session. And then it jumped way up. And then it kind of stayed up there. And so I like bringing this up just to demonstrate that in some cases, it takes the brain a few times to figure out how to access this information, how to go along with the program. And so what that means is that if you run a session and you're like, well, I don't know, I didn't really feel much. It didn't seem to do a heck of a lot. I don't know. I wouldn't necessarily just write it off and be done with it, because it may just mean that your brain needs a few times to get the hang of it and to figure out how to go with it. So, you know, if you find a program that you're like, I really want to use this program, I think it's going to be a good one for me, and you don't notice something immediately, don't give up on it. Just hang in there with it. Unless it, you know, is unpleasant for some reason, then of course, you know, do something different. Okay. I'm going to stop sharing for a minute. That was a lot of information. So let me just check in with everybody that's on here real quick. If you have any questions before we start looking at the glasses themselves.
Will we need the headphones also at this time?
You won't, excuse me. You won't need them right now, but
okay.
When you run your own session, you'll want to use headphones. Probably. You don't have to. So here's the thing, right? Is that the most powerful part of the AVE system is the lights.
Yeah.
So if you don't like the sound, or the sound is unpleasant for some reason or whatever, you don't have to use it. The glasses are more powerful. In fact, what I do a lot of times, and I see a lot of other people do, is they use the glasses, but then they'll use some other kind of audio. So it might be a guided meditation, or it might be white noise, like we talked about, or space music or spa music or something, you know. So you can kind of mix and match a little bit with the audio. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Sure. Any other questions? Okay. I'm going to take that to mean that everybody more or less followed along with my quick download of Brainwaves 101 and what we need to know. Okay. So using these glasses is fairly straightforward. Now, I know at least 2 of you have already downloaded the software, which is great, because you kind of need the software to run the hardware, right? So the hardware is the glasses. That's the hardware.
Mhm.
The software you have to download. And so if you haven't done that, or if you're watching this and, as a recording, you go to the Microsoft App Store, make sure you're at the tab at the top that says apps, type in David Live. David, like somebody's name, live, like not recorded, live, David Live. And you'll see the app come up, click on that, and then there's a way to download it. Right. So once you do that, it will be an icon on your desktop, or you'll be able to access it on your computer. That's the software. And we're going to look at that in a minute. But the hardware is very simple, right? It's the glasses, and that's it. And then you got this cable. So the cable plugs in at the bottom of the glasses. There's a smaller port, not port, but a plug. And then you got the USB plug. So the small one goes into the glasses, and it just kind of pops in there. Make sure it's snug, right? You should hear it kind of like click a little bit into place. And then the USB, you're obviously just going to plug into a USB port on your computer. So I'm going to do that right now. And the first time you plug it in, and maybe not even the first time, you might get a pop-up box on your computer that says setting up a device, right? So that's actually a good sign, because what it means is that the computer recognized that you just plugged something in and that it has to do something, that there's something it's supposed to do. So it's communicating with the glasses and making sure that it knows how to use them, okay? And my pop-up box just said, devices ready. Spectrum is set up and ready to go. Now, if you don't get one of those pop-up boxes, it's not a crisis. It doesn't mean it's not working, but you're likely to get one of those, okay? Now, I'm going to share my screen again. This time, we're going to be looking at my computer, so you can kind of see what I'm doing. So what you're going to do is you're going to look for the David Live icon. So mine's down here. If you don't see it here for some reason, you can always go to your search bar and type in David Live and look for it that way. Or you can go to the little Windows icon and scroll down and look for David Live. So I'm going to double click. There we go. Okay. So you get this simple little interface up here that shows up. You see there's a little box up here that says Spectrum version 1.2, and it's got some numbers and things. You need to select that, because basically those are your glasses. So it's asking you like, well, what are you wanting to use? What are you wanting to use with this software? So you have to tell it, I want to use these glasses. So I just clicked it. And as soon as I clicked it, it said one device selected. So if I unselect it, no devices selected. So I can't run the glasses if there's no devices selected. So you got to select it. Okay. Then you're going to go to start live session. Okay, there's an update available. I'm not going to do that now. I'm going to skip it. But, if you have an update available, you might want to do that. So first things first, if you go to this preset at the very top, so I'm going to click on the word. And when I do that, I get this list of programs. And you see it starts with the very slowest, sub delta, below delta, and then it goes faster and faster and faster. Some of these in the middle, the mood booster and the brain booster, are some of those dual channel experiences, right? Where there's something happening different on the left and the right hemisphere. Now, you don't see the Gansfeld on here, but I'm going to show you how to use that, okay? So let's just for now say we're going to do healthy alpha. I click on that. And now you see the left and the right frequency both jumped to 10.2 hertz. The frequency that it's using is 10.2 cycles per second. So if I show you my glasses right now, see if I can. So the lights are flickering on and off 10.2 times a second. Now, you're going to wear these with your eyes closed, right? So when you put the glasses on, make sure your eyes are closed. It's much more pleasant that way. Now, on the surface, that's it. You're done. So like if you just want to do an alpha program, boom, you're finished, right? You just run this as long as you want, take it off when you're finished. Let's already start to think a little bit more clever here. So let's say you do want to do an alpha program, but now remember, alpha goes between 8 and 10, or sorry, 8 and 12 cycles per second. This one said it was healthy alpha, 10.2. And that is a healthy alpha. Healthy alpha is kind of right in the middle of the spectrum of alpha activity. But let's pretend that you wanted to do a meditation where you were in a little bit of a slower alpha state, maybe 9 hertz. Well, you could open this program and then grab these little sliders and just move them until you're down to 9 cycles per second. Now, I'm having a hard time landing right on it, so we'll just leave it at 9.1. So now I put both sides at 9.1. I just slowed it down a little bit. Or you could speed it up, right? So you can manually adjust these to make it whatever you want. In fact, you don't even have to pick a program. You could just, when you open it, you could just move the sliders whichever way you want to get the frequency you want. Now, another part of this that's important is this little randomization button right here. And you can see right now it's clicked on. If I click on it, I can take it off or I can put it back on. And what the randomization does is it shifts the frequency that it's using within 1 hertz either way of the target. What does that mean? Okay, in this case, 9.1 is the target frequency. So if I have randomization on, sometimes it's going to be at 8.1, sometimes it's going to be at 10.1, and sometimes it's going to be at 9.1. So it fluctuates 1 hertz on either side of the target. Now, why would you want that? You would want that because it's usually easier for the brain to entrain to a signal if there's a little bit of variation. So if you just keep running the same frequency at the brain, sometimes it doesn't like that as much. It's too repetitive. It likes there to be a little bit of movement. So in general, I find that the randomization is a helpful tool to use with this program. Now, if you don't like it for some reason, and what I mean by don't like it, I actually had this happen with somebody recently, that the movement of the lights going a little faster, a little slower, if that bothers you for some reason, you can just take the randomization off. It's fine. No problem. Okay. Let's go back to the preset for a minute and let's pick a different program. So let's go to the mood booster. Now, you remember I said that the left and right frequencies are doing different things. So now you can see it. As soon as I clicked mood booster, you see that the left frequency is 10.2. That was that healthy alpha, remember? The right frequency is at 20. Now, there's a couple of things that are important about this. The first is that when it says left frequency, what they mean is that that's the left visual field, right? So the visual field is split. for both eyes. So the left side of both eyes sends information to the right hemisphere. The right visual field on both eyes sends information to the left hemisphere. It crosses over. So it's a little confusing at first, but you almost have to flip this around in your mind. So if it says left frequency, that's actually what's going to the right hemisphere. And if it says right frequency, that's going to the left hemisphere. So remember how I said earlier that generally these types of programs, they're trying to stimulate the left hemisphere more than the right. So that makes sense here. Look, right? Because this one, right hemisphere going to the left, 20 hertz. That's more stimulating. Left frequency going to the right, 10 hertz. That's that healthy alpha. It's more relaxing. So again, that approach is great for things like depression and ADHD and things like that. If you wanted to modify this for psychic exploration, where maybe we want to quiet down the left hemisphere and activate the right hemisphere, you could just flip-flop these, right? I could just take this and move it up to 20 and take this one and move it down to 10. Right? So I manually just flipped it. And you could make it even more extreme if you want. If you said, man, you know what? I want this to be in theta. Well, you could take it down to theta. Right? 7 hertz is in theta. Maybe 20 hertz feels like too fast. Well, you move it down to 14, right? Or maybe you want to crank it all the way up to gamma. You could do that. Now you got gamma in the right hemisphere and theta in the left hemisphere. And in fact, if I show you the lights now, you can see how one side is flickering at a slower rate. That's the theta. And one side, it almost looks like it's just on permanently. That's because it's flickering 40 times a second. It's flickering so fast that it looks like it's just permanently on. If you look at your glasses, when you do that, you'll see that there actually is a little flicker there. It's just hard to see. So this is how we can use it to send different information to the two hemispheres. Up here, this dual frequency mode, if you click on that, you can also see that there's a sync and an alternate. So this is something I wouldn't really mess with these initially, but if you want to play with these, you can. So if it is, I'm going to slow these down, both frequencies, so you can see more clearly what I'm about to show you. So I'm just going to put them both really low. It doesn't matter if they're exact for now or not. So you'll see that when it's dual, it's actually alternating. So it's doing the two sides kind of opposite each other. If you do sync, they're happening together. Actually, I used the wrong language when I was talking about dual. So, here's alternate. You can see that it's shifting back and forth between the left and the right hemispheres, right? What dual is doing is it's controlling the two visual fields separately. Look what happened when I put it on alternate. It just shifted to one frequency. So it's using the same frequency. It's just shifting left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right. And if I put it on sync, also one frequency. They're synchronized. Both of them are doing the same thing. So dual is actually where you have two options. You can do different things with the two different sides of the visual field. Okay, now I'm going to go back to sync for a second. And now if you want to do Ganzfeld, remember there's no Ganzfeld option in here. But if you go to the slider bar and you slide it all the way to the end, look at that. It says Ganzfeld. And now they're just on. They're just holding that. Okay. Now, in general, I probably wouldn't mess with the sound very much. I mean, if you want to, go for it. Some people like the heartbeat to be on. It's kind of a little nice calming rhythm that you can pace your breathing to. So you could turn that on if you want. The pitch and the heart rate, if you want to mess with that, you can. I almost never touch that. But the other part that's going to be fun for you to play with is the lights. So if you go down here to the little glasses icon, there's a left color and a right color. We can control them separately. So in this case, we're doing a Ganzfeld. And remember I said red is kind of the typical color we use for Ganzfeld. So I just turned the left side on red. And now I'm going to do the right side, put that on red as well. So you can pick whatever colors you want. You could pick different colors for the two sides for any of the programs. And so that's kind of a nice feature because then you start to get into color theory. And in general, the brighter colors are going to be more stimulating. The cooler colors are going to be more relaxing. So if you're wanting something that's healing, green, right? If you're wanting something that's going to get you into a deep state, blues, purples, things like that. If you're wanting something that's more activating, yellows, oranges, reds. So that's a basic way to think about it. And then down here at the bottom, we're in live mode, but we can also do, you can put a timer on, which can be helpful, right? Like if you know that you want to run a 20-minute session, you can set the timer, and then that way you don't have to worry about it, right? You just know, you'll know automatically when the session is over, because the lights will go off. And so that's also a nice way to do it, right? Because it'll have it's called a soft off. If you use the timer at the end of the session, it will gradually dim the lights and dim the audio instead of just being abrupt. And then the last two things down here at the bottom of the box, there's a volume icon. So you can use that to control the volume of the program. I turned it off right now because I didn't want it interfering with our conversation. And then this little one with the sun is the brightness of the lights on the glasses. And so, I'm going to turn it down. Right, so we can get it. And I can also make it super intense. So by default, it starts at 50%. And again, you're doing this with your eyes closed. But one of the things I usually tell people is, in general, you want it to be as bright as is comfortable. So in some cases, if the lights are too intense, people feel a little bit anxious. And so we certainly don't want that. So it's just something you have to kind of experiment with a little bit to figure out where the right spot is. But that's how you would control it. That's how you would control the brightness. A lot of info. Questions? No questions? Was it overwhelming, or was it clear? Was it so clear that you don't have any questions, or was it so overwhelming you don't know where to start? No response.
Okay. No, I lost you there for a minute, Dr. Jeff. Thanks. Kathleen here. So I got some programs that I can just select, like a list of hand programs.
Yes, those are all of the ones under the preset.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. So if you go to that preset word, and you click on that, then you're going to get those, the sub delta, delta, starting with the slowest and going down. Those are all presets.
Gotcha.
So if you just
Okay.
click one of those, it's going to give you a program that is targeted for whatever whatever it says.
Right. Okay. Very powerful. Gives you a lot of customization. Thank you.
Yeah.
Very
I mean,
helpful.
it's simple, but very versatile, which is one of the reasons I like it so much. There's just a lot you can do.
Yeah.
So Jeff, I'm wondering about the sound. So this will have sound choices in this app. Is that correct? But you said we could also listen to white noise.
So there will be sound that automatically is programmed to go with each of these approaches.
Oh,
And so you can use, so if you just plug your headphones in and don't do anything else, you just run the program, you're going to hear, it's going to sound like little beeps. It's going to be like do 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 do. And and so what it's doing is it's turning the sound on and off at the same rate as the glasses are flickering, so that you're getting both auditory and visual information driving your brain in the same direction. Now, some people don't particularly like that, right? Because it's kind of annoying, right? It's like do 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 do. It's not the most pleasant sound in the world. So that's where I was saying some people, instead of listening to, you could turn the volume all the way off, like I did, right? If you go into the software to that little sound icon and just turn it off, and then open up a YouTube thing or open up a guided meditation and listen to that instead, or a white noise app.
Oh, and then you don't use the headphones, or you do use the headphones and you just listen to this other app.
Yeah.
It's not like you have to adjust this to get something different.
Nope.
Okay. Gotcha.
Just turn the volume off and just run a different player.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Does everybody know where they're going to start?
Alpha.
That was a trick question.
I did start one, and it was one of the preset ones, and it was for I don't know, for energy. I'm older, wanted a little more energy for the day, and afterwards I ended up doing a few tasks, and it's like, this is so a little feedback.
Yeah, good. And typically the effects of the glasses will, sometimes there's a delayed response. You may not notice something immediately after running the session. It may be an hour later, or it might be a couple hours later. So sometimes there's a delay. So that's a good thing to be aware of. That just noticing later in the day, like, oh, how am I feeling, a few hours after you ran a session. So that's something to be aware of. The other thing is, making sure that you want to probably keep a journal or something of what programs you're running, what settings you used, what colors you used, how you felt later, because that will help you start to really refine which approaches work best for you. Because this is the tricky part, even though there's some general things to get us started, everybody's an individual. And so you have to kind of find out what really works best for you as an individual. And, if you don't keep track of things, you're going to forget because there's too many options. So as you start messing with stuff, so anyway, I would strongly recommend that. It's also a good idea to drink some water before and after, because partly the benefit of this is it's increasing brain blood flow as well. And so your brain is going to want to be moving things through the system. It's going to be removing toxins and things like that out of your brain cells. And so you want to make sure your brain's hydrated so that it can easily, kind of flush that stuff out. So if you ever run a session and you feel like you got a little bit of a headache, it's probably you're dehydrated. Any last things?
A huge thank you.
Yes,
This
thank
is
you very
awesome.
much.
Yeah, I hope that was helpful. And
Yeah, thank you.
That's very much.
good. And I'm gonna stick this up on YouTube. I'll probably make it like a private link or something. I'm not just gonna have it out there. But if you'd like, I'm happy to send you a link to the video once it's up in case you want to go back and review anything.
Wonderful.
And yeah. And if you run into any other problems, just let me know.
Okay.
Thank
Thank
you
you
so
so
much.
much.
All right, thanks guys.
Okay,
Thank
bye-bye.
Have
you.
fun.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye-bye.